Hello there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Live with Lindsay. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to Monique Caissie, who will be joining us in just a minute. Monique is a human behavior consultant, and she's going to be talking to us tonight about assertive communication, how to say what we need and get what we want. And I think this is a topic that so many people are interested in learning more about. If you're watching, I'd invite you to let us know that you're here. Tell us where you're watching from. All throughout, I'd love it if you'd share your questions. Monique is here to answer those for you. Before we bring Monique in, though, I also just wanted to share that, as many of you know, I have launched my podcast, the Workplace Communication Podcast. I wanted to thank everybody for your downloads and for listening, and I've been getting fantastic feedback from everyone, and just really appreciate you participating and listening to all of the interviews. I do want to share that Monique has done an interview on the podcast. I haven't officially launched that episode yet because I'm still trying to catch up on some of the first ones we did, but you can find Monique's podcast episode here, lindsaylapaquette.com/podcast, if you're interested in what she's sharing with us tonight and you want to learn more. It's not specifically on assertive communication. The podcast episode is on building better boundaries, but it's all related to improving our communication in the workplace. And so on that note, I will bring Monique in. Hi, Monique.
Hey, we had some
How are you?
technical issues there. It's exciting.
We had some tech issues. I thought I might be going live alone, but I thought that's okay. I'll just talk about communication. So I'm glad you're here.
I'm 100% sure. Thanks for inviting me. It's always wonderful to see you.
Well, thank you for joining me. So I'm just going to share a bit of Monique's bio here. So Monique Caissie works with organizations that are committed to reducing conflict and misunderstandings to create a culture of collaboration, fun, and productivity. And as a speaker, facilitator, and coach, Monique is your guide to getting along better with the people who drive you crazy. And she has a background as a former crisis interventionist. So she has a really unique perspective on how to improve communication in the workplace. Again, for those who are watching, I would love it if you just share with us where you're watching from. Just drop a note in the comments. And like I said, if you have any questions to share with Monique, I'll bring those up as we go along. Monique, maybe we can start off by having you tell us what assertive communication is and what it isn't, because I know in my work, I've certainly seen some misconceptions around this. So I'd love it if you could share a little bit.
And it's so interesting because when you speak to somebody who is at, like, let's say it's a spectrum and that assertiveness is in the middle. Yeah. At one end is passive, and then at the other end is aggressive. And yes. Then assertiveness lives in the middle. So it's a healthy form of concise, honest communication, one-on-one. Aggressive people think assertiveness is passive, and passive people think that assertiveness is aggressive.
It's pushy.
So they really think it's the other extreme, but really it lives in the middle. So it's the place where honesty and action takes place, because we can actually start when we have assertive communications. It's really giving people the data they need to behave the way you need them to behave, so both of you are successful, especially in business. Everybody needs to, when we start hoarding information or we start backstabbing someone, like the little passive aggressive stuff behind people's backs, none of that stuff is helpful. So assertiveness lives in the middle, where everybody gets what they need to get the job done, and that everybody can excel.
Yeah. So before we go on, I just wanted to say hi to David yet again for watching. Thank you for joining us again. If anyone else is watching again, just drop a line in the comments that you're here and share your questions. So Monique, I wanted to share that. So I used to think that assertive communication was passive. Okay. I was raised in a family of four noisy, talkative children. There were 6 of us in all. And you needed to force your way into being heard, or you just didn't have a voice because there was so much vying for attention and talking space. And I think we all, thinking through my family, all except my mom maybe, developed this very aggressive communication style, which got me far in life. I'll be honest, it did until it didn't work. until I started noticing the nuances of where it wasn't working. And I see that a lot in the workplaces, how
Right.
that perception of assertiveness as being passive, or not, sometimes not like being enough of a go-getter is really detrimental. So I'd love it if you could share with us some tips, maybe first of all, on, not tips, but signs maybe of what assertive communication looks like. What are some symptoms that somebody's using assertive communication, and then again for maybe passive and aggressive.
Okay. So there's no symptoms. I hate that
Well,
word.
so I mean, yeah,
Like,
symptoms isn't the right word. I mean, if somebody's wondering, oh, am I an aggressive communicator?
oh,
Am I
I
too
see.
passive?
Okay. So
How can they
what are the clues?
figure out where they
The
clues?
clues
Yeah.
where they might be sitting. And the thing is it's a spectrum, and we all land somewhere. And some of us like to mix things up, so we become passive aggressive, right?
Right.
From Paris, Alan. Bonjour.
He's here with us from
On est à
Paris.
Montréal.
Oui, on parle français.
On
Mon mari vient de Paris.
So, what was the question again? I've already
give us some clues as to what passive.
Okay, so if someone is being assertive, they have a lot of confidence. Obviously, it's always easier to be assertive when you're confident. If you're overconfident, you tend to be aggressive. And when you're underconfident, you tend to be passive. So it's kind of simple. So when someone and I do these assertiveness groups, and I love to do a brainstorm and say, describe, or I give them each sheets and little groups, and I say, and it always comes back. It's about being respectful. It's about being confident. It's about knowing what you want and being so self-aware that you can express to others, this is what I want and what I need. And so when people are really under assertive, they tend to not always know what they want, or not, even more so, not know how they feel. And there's a whole piece around I don't know how to say how I feel about this. And I work a lot with people more on the passive scale, trying to become more assertive. And so that's what I've noticed consistently, is they don't even have words for their feelings. And I recognize that because I'm the opposite of you. I grew up in a family that I was, there was alcoholism and mental illness. And I myself have ADHD, and children with ADHD get a lot of corrections. And so we grow up feeling like, well, am I doing it right? Is it okay? Like, is someone judging me? And so I grew up with a lot of self-doubt. And when I first heard the term imposter syndrome, I figured they had made that up for me. I was like, because I was always second guessing myself. I was always questioning myself. And that is from my growing up years. So yes, when you said, oh, I think I was like that because of my family, we do learn this at our mother and at our father's knee. And if we aren't getting the resources we need, whether it be love or attention, or getting to go on a field trip with the class where my sister could, but I couldn't, like, we can see these differences. Some people start saying, hey, I need to speak up if I'm going to get it. I didn't get that at all growing up. I got like, what do you mean you have an opinion? We'll tell you what your opinion is. And so that really crushed my ability to ask for what I want. And I was always double checking with others. Am I allowed to want this? Am I allowed to need this? And what do so I really didn't see what my own needs. So there's a lot of self-awareness work that goes into getting clarity into what we want, what we feel, where we want to go. And, as a life coach, I've seen that a lot. I've worked mostly with women. I've worked with men too, but that has been traditionally, I have to check with someone to see if I want this, which is so crazy, right? We see it too much. And it happens also in the business world. Like I've met some super powerful, accomplished women. And when we start talking, they go, I'm always second guessing myself. And I'm always wondering, should I even be asking for this? Am I being too aggressive? There have been messages, and depending on the age group, I'm a certain age. And so like my mother had no opinions. And then here I was trying to have opinions. So the younger generation, my daughters, certainly have a lot of opinions, and I was ill-equipped to deal with them because I didn't, how do I encourage this, but how do I also contain them? So so an assertive parent knows how to do that very easily. And an assertive leader knows how to do that easily. They don't get involved in the emotional backlog, and they don't let it get to an emotional place where everybody's triggered and nobody's talking. And they say, okay, people, we're going to talk about this, and have to do it one-on-one and then get the group together. But assertive people communicate. Assertiveness is communication, but a healthy, respectful, clear communication.
Yeah. So I relate to a lot of what you were saying. So despite having been somebody who was overly aggressive, I would say, I think it came from a place of self-doubt. And I think it did lead me to at times not expressing my opinion, and then it would build up until it got to, no, you need to listen to me, and I'm not going to stop until you listen to me. And so I even see how I would waver, and still do. I mean, I can't say that 100% of the time assertive communication is despite teaching communication coming always naturally. It's sometimes something I have to really sit back and reflect on when my tendency is to either want to step back and ignore the issue or be too aggressive. I have to really think sometimes, and okay, how do I need to address this professionally? I'm dealing with a bit of a messy situation that I feel I can speak about because the person's not on social media, but with somebody that I was consulting to, and it's uncomfortable to have to reach out and say, hey, this is not okay. These are my needs. Like, can we agree on that or not? But I always come back to, you do this for work. You need to practice what you preach. And I try my best. So like you say, self-awareness is a huge piece of that. I just want to go to the comments for a second. So David here is saying assertive communication is vital. It's a delicate balance between being stepped on, being an angry, overreactive person, which is such a great way to describe it.
And it really is, because it touches on assertiveness communication. When we think of like the passive person or the aggressive person, they're acting from a place from their limbic system. It's an overreaction. Either they're hiding under their desk avoiding you, or they're or they're in your face saying, why didn't you get this done? So there's examples on both ends. But assertiveness communication is more logical. And it's based on what's really going on, not just the limbic system. It's on like, okay, take all that apart. That's why I encourage people when they're in the face of something to say, hold that thought. I'll be right back. Even if they have to step out, take 3 deep breaths, go through the 4 steps I've taught them. Where's the camera? The 4 steps that I've taught them, and to go back in and build that assertiveness muscle. And I do think it's a muscle. It's something we have to practice. And I have met some really wonderfully assertive people. And so I would almost stalk them to
model after them.
I was like, but I would ask their permission. Can I ask you questions? And how did you know to do that? Some of them seemed instinctive, but most of them, it's because they made the effort to develop this skill. It didn't come naturally, or they had a very good role model when it did come naturally, like their mother or their father who said, no, you can, and gave them the tools. So for people like us, it's really good to step back. And I find that this 4-step script that I use is so easy, and it fits on the back of my business card. So people would keep it in their wallet. And it was just like the easiest thing. It's just to say, these are the elements. These are the 4 elements you should be able to spot when you're having this interaction. So
can I just interject for a second? So before we get into the model, I'd love to hear from people listening. If you've had someone in your life that you've been able to model after in terms of learning how to communicate more assertively, because when you said that, Monique, I was thinking of one of my jobs I had, where I guess just intuitively I was drawn to this woman who was able to set clear limits and say what she needed, and she didn't let people give her crap, but in a kind way. And so, to be honest, I didn't even ask. I just gobbed up everything she said in every meeting and tried to learn how to do it her way because it was so effective. So I'm curious if any of you have somebody that you've modeled after. I just wanted to say hi to Tarek, who is here, and thank you for watching. So Monique, maybe if you can get into describing your model to us a bit to help people communicate more assertively. And while Monique is doing so, if people have questions for Monique about how to communicate more assertively or anything related to this, by all means, stick a comment in the chat and we'll get to that as we're going.
Great. So I'm just going to share the 4 main steps. There's actually 5, but that's for the real gung-ho people.
The real assertive people.
First you learn the basic. Yeah. First you learn the basic. And I call it RISE because it just felt good. It's like rising above the conflict. It just felt like a good word. So the acronym I use is RISE. And the R stands for review their behavior. Because when we're addressing someone in an assertive thing, we want to identify what behavior change we're looking for. So, and it starts with when you do this or when you said that. So it's very easy. So the R is review their behavior with when you. It's very short. Everything's very short. The second one, the I, is you have to describe how it impacted, how this behavior is impacting you or other people. So when you're doing that, you're saying, when this happens, when you do this, this happens, like the team is impacted this way. Or when you said that, I felt. Yeah. So that's the second one. And the third one is you have to specify the desired behaviors. And this is the one that I found people have the hardest time with because they're not always sure what they want instead. And so if you can figure out, I didn't like that, you have to take a second, 3 breaths to figure out what you want instead. And so those are the 3, and people might do the first and the second. If they do it right and they do the third, often it stops there. You don't even need to go to the 4th. But the 4th one is to explore the consequences or explore the results. So there's a negative result or a positive result or a pleasure promise. Like if you do this, this will happen. It'll be great. Or if you don't do it, and that's the pain promise, right? So those are the 4. So it's review the behavior, identify the impact, specify the behavior change you're looking for, and then explore the results or the consequences. So when we're talking about when you do this, that one's pretty easy. You're just sticking, and you're not gunny sacking. You're not saying when you do this, and you did it last week, and you did it before.
Right. Right.
No, you're just talking
about.
Tone
has a big part of it, doesn't it? Tone of voice. Tone of voice has a big part of it. Yeah.
So the 3 breaths before you do this are really helpful. And just like you just want to stay calm, right? And so when you're saying, when you spoke to me like that, then you go into the I feel. Now, I feel you're a jerk is not.
It's not a feeling.
That is not an I statement. It's impacting me this way, or it's impacting, like everything.
It's also not a feeling, right? So I find a lot of people, when you ask people for feelings, will say, I feel that you,
yes.
And those aren't feelings. Feelings are emotion words: angry, disappointed, jealous. And it's always surprising to me how hard that is.
That's a really
for adults to come up with that emotion.
You know what I love to do when I'm doing a workshop on this? I give them a sheet of emoticons.
Yeah.
With all the different words. I was stupefied. I was like, and I say, pick the ones you wish you had used. We talk about them. And it's just, we have to elevate our own dictionary. We have to add stuff. So you've been studying.
So we're homeschooling the kids. We've decided, and I've told them that we're starting every day with our feelings journal, and they'll circle off their feeling. My daughter is not on board, so she's feeling angry about this. Okay. But we've told them that they'll circle their feelings on their feelings journal, and they can write their 1-page journal, whatever, about their day. But because to me, this is a fundamental life skill. Both of my kids have ADHD and a psychiatric diagnosis, and recognizing feelings and expressing them in ways that will leave people hearing them is not their best skill. And frankly, they're also from a family where, it's not a skill that I was born with either. It's what I had to really work on. And so I just see this as being a base life skill for them to be able to be successful in the workplace one day.
It's so huge. And I think one of the first places I ever got in touch with that was years and years ago when I went to a 12-step group. And it was called Adults, Children of Alcoholics. And so it's like Al-Anon, but it's where alcoholics and Al-Anon kind of meet. So it's like we're all adult children. We all learn these things. So Al-Anon people are people who are families and loved ones of an alcoholic. And then, of course, there's AA, which is everyone's familiar with. So I ended up there, and they went around the room and they said, "How was your week? How did it feel?" And when they got to me, I was, can we skip me? I had no idea what to say. Yeah. And then I listened to everybody and how they felt about their week. And then when it got back to me, I started to cry. I said, well, if I'm crazy, then so are all of you. You got to express what I didn't have words for. And I felt like I finally found a place to find myself, you know? And so it doesn't matter where you do it, whether you find yourself in church scriptures, or you find yourself in a self-help group, or you find yourself in a book. Doesn't matter, but we got to start somewhere. So that's where I started. And I realized when I was working with people that a lot of them should have been in that meeting with me, because I learned about how to identify my own feelings and eventually how to express them. But it is not something that everyone had the privilege like your children have, even if they're angry about it. It'll be like piano later. Oh, I'm so glad my mom taught me this.
Right. That's what I figure. I'm like, you can hate me for it now, but you will
therapy later if there's
thank me for it later. Yeah. So I kind of derailed us a bit with pulling out that picture, because I wanted to ask you, going back to your RISE framework, if you can share like a full example from start to finish of what a sentence might look like saying that. And while Monique's doing that, if there's any situations that anyone listening is experiencing where you want some tips on how to address it in a way that people will hear you and you'll be able to really resolve that issue, then go ahead. And if you're feeling comfortable, share an example with us, and we can get Monique to give you a sentence that you can use with that person next time you're faced with the situation.
Yeah. And I'll supply you somehow with a sheet that they can follow, which is kind of easier to follow.
That'd be great. So we'll put links in the YouTube video that will be,
I'll send that to you. I just have to figure, I have technology issues these days, so I have to figure out where I'm going to put it so you can access it. So like, let's say you've got somebody, let's use, I don't usually come up with my own examples, but let's say someone is always argumentative in every team meeting. That can happen, where they just seem to need to be the center of attention. Okay. So it's better not to do it in the team meeting, just saying, because it can really put them even more on the defensive. So then we have to have this conversation with them. Now we're observing it, so it's easier. If we've observed it, it's easier to have that conversation with them than to have someone come and say, handle this person, this is what they do, right? That's a completely different thing. But if it's something we're seeing and we need to see a behavior change and we know it's clear, it's easier. So we just say, I noticed that during the meetings, people bring up ideas and you sound defensive and argumentative. It's really not allowing people to express themselves freely. So the R is, I noticed when you do this, the impact is people stop talking, right? So I need to know that everyone feels like they can be heard, including you, right? But we need, it just is, it's affecting our, let's say, our decision making or something like that. So the pain and pleasure promises is, if you could take a deep breath and listen with an open heart, you may see there's some value to what other people are saying. And the impact is that the group will really appreciate that, and you'll learn something, and they'll be open to hearing you even more. So that's the positive. Like, it's a little bit long, but anyway. And then the negative. Yeah. And then the negative would be, if you don't do that, it really is impacting the team, and we're going to need to have another conversation.
Okay. So you share both is what I'm understanding, the positive and the negative.
It really depends, right? Like, depends on the person. Like, if you like, especially with COVID, We should take it, the S. Okay, I'm going to introduce the last one. Rises, or S, rise. Is to seek to understand their position.
Yeah.
So really, it's a 5-step program, but the 4 steps is just that is the conversation. But we do have to bring in compassion and kindness and empathy, because if we don't do this right, we can break the trust.
Yeah.
And when we break the trust, we break the culture is so affected. A culture without trust is a culture where there's a revolving door of people coming in and out, of people talking badly about you as an employer. You don't want that. And also, if you have people that are under you, they're watching you. If they are supervising or managing, they're duplicating that. So you need to be the model. Yeah.
And I can see where that assertiveness, sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought as David's comment came in, which I'll read in a second, David. In fact, I'll read it right now and see if my thought comes back. So David says there was a situation 8 years ago with a coworker who was extremely opinionated with politics. And one day I was getting something in the kitchen when all of a sudden this guy was literally in my face, angrily telling me why I should vote his way. Oh goodness, this is representative of the current political climate I would get to right now in the States. I told him to get out of my face, and I also reported him to my manager.
Right. Yeah. So this person was acting very aggressively, and obviously you just have to say stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's just, you need to explain this.
Yeah. I think there's nuances, right? Where when someone's behavior crosses a line of, you're trying to communicate. I mean, it still is communicating assertively, but you're trying to be understanding and listen to their point of view and all that. But when somebody doesn't respect those boundaries, there does become a point where you need to be like, whoa, that's enough. Really. Now,
if you want to use the script in that case, I think stop is plenty, because it's so obvious, and but stop, or I will report you. And in this case, he was read. Whenever we're going to give a consequence, you better be willing to live up to it, is the one thing I want to say. Never say, or I'm gonna, and not follow through, because it's not how do I say this? It's not about how harsh the result or the consequence is. It's about the certainty.
Yeah.
So we need to be very firm. So let's say this guy comes, he's in your face. You can put up your hand and say, when you yell at me, there's the behavior. I feel attacked, or I feel however you feel.
Yeah.
And you say, I don't want to hear politics at work.
Yeah.
Pointing at. That ends there, right? And then it's if you stop that, then I won't be stressed when you come to speak to me, and we can work better together. If you don't, I will report you. But I mean, this is very short. It's like, whoa, stop.
Yeah.
When you're, I'm feeling attacked. It's not even the place. And, so it's just inappropriate behavior. And it's really sad, because like with COVID and I mean, these are and the politics that are happening in many parts of the world. We're in Canada, so we feel pretty safe here politically, but in the States, they're going through so much. So it's really hard not to get overwhelmed. And at this point, it would have to depend on the culture of the company. I would hope there is someone in the company who can sit down with somebody like this and say, what is going on? And do the seek to understand. You don't have to, if it's a colleague or somebody, just in your face. I don't think that's your job. If you have a relationship, I would hope that you'd say, whoa, what's going on with you? And get into a conversation about, you seem like this is not you, you're stressed. But this guy, it sounds like from the description, it was somebody that was very political and did it all the time. And he probably got other warnings too. But
and that's where communication gets so tricky, is that there are real nuances to what is effective with different personalities. If you take someone really passive and you take an approach of, whoa, back off, get out of my face, that's going to work very differently than with someone who's overly, or it's going to have very different impacts. And so
I think if we know who we're working with, it helps, because if we know that somebody is more on the passive side and suddenly they're very upset, this is whenever people are either hiding under their desk or yelling in your face, this is a stress response, right?
Yeah.
So we know they're under stress. We can ask them to tap into what is making you like this, like what's making you feel this, helping them to understand themselves. And also it puts us in a compassionate place. I can see you're very scared. I can see you're very worried. I can see this is a big passion of yours, right? But I know that I was posting with someone today on LinkedIn, and it's a friend of mine that he lives in the States, and he had posted something really interesting. I went, oh, and I reacted to it. And I said, well, I posted something really personal on Facebook. And he says, now I got to read it. And I sent it to him, and it was, it was about COVID and people dying and my opinion about it. And I posted a private message because it's not for LinkedIn, but he said, I can see you're very passionate about that. And my response was, yeah, I get pretty passionate when people die around me. Yep. I take it a little personally when people are dying. So passion, was I passionate? No, I'm mad. I'm mad that people are doing things, right? So people try to, massage it so it's a little bit more palatable. Oh, you're very passionate. No, I'm not. I'm pissed.
Right. Well, and to me, the core of being able to be assertive is being able to regulate and manage our reactions to our emotions. And I shared, I don't know if you saw it, but yesterday when I was at IKEA, a man was crossing in front of another car and I didn't see what happened prior. So I don't know if the driver didn't see the man crossing or if the driver saw him and just didn't leave him space to walk. But in any case, I guess the car kept going. The man kept walking. The man took his box of furniture and smashed it onto the roof of the guy's car. And they sort of got at it. And I was sitting in the car waiting for my stuff to be put in my trunk and just observing, thinking, wouldn't this be a different interaction if instead of, the anger driving this, if he had gone to the window and said, hey, dude, I'm crossing in front of you and you weren't even watching, like you could have hit me, and said it in a way that was not, accusatory. And because I've had situations where, I've either been the one in the car who someone else has, I don't know, cut me off or whatnot. And I've also been the person who accidentally doesn't notice, your kid's crying in the backseat, not that you should look back, but you do. And then there's the guy with the box. And so for that learning to occur, we have to have those conversations in an assertive way so that the person can listen and then reflect on their behavior instead of going right into that defensive mode, like you say, that fight or flight that comes from the limbic system that happens to all of us, some to more extents than others.
And it's okay to apologize after too.
Right.
Like, we need to, let's say that we make a mistake. And of course, that's never happened to either of us, has it, Linda?
Oh, no. I've never even yelled at my kids.
I know. But it just happens all the time. But see, the thing is I think people are so afraid of making a mistake, especially at work. We think it's going to impact us way more. Yeah. But I mean, how do you remedy that? You apologize.
Yes.
Say, boy, I lost it. You didn't deserve it. And this was personal and I lost it. And, or at least to find out, if it's in reverse, if you want to heal it and that this person is now embarrassed, is to make an attempt to say, can we have a conversation about it? Yeah. Now, if the person doesn't want to, and I have somebody in my life that doesn't clearly for a long time now, does not want to have a conversation about something. And it's like, hey, pick up I've made the effort to communicate before. And it was just like, okay, fine. This isn't going to be an honest conversation anyway, because this person is not interested. And so I just had to decide, well, then you have to ask yourself, how much of a relationship do I need with this person? right? Like, is this somebody that I need? Like, I hear about people saying, oh, I'm not happy at work because no, we're not going out, and all the jobs I had, we had like the volleyball team or whatever, the baseball team after work. And, we don't have that here. And and it's like, well, were you thinking you would get a job and braid each other's hair at lunch? It's not like that. Some people are there to work, especially if you're in a certain culture where everybody's like, there's a lot of work to be done. So we have to take into account what the reality is of what's going on and what the culture is. If we do have a boss who's a yeller, if you go into an interview and you see him yelling at someone, you have to ask yourself, do I want to work? If I'm on the receiving end of that, can I handle that? And when should I tell him that that's not going to be acceptable?
Well, and in my experience, in those situations, if the boundaries aren't set really firmly early on, I find it has been much harder with people who have been in those situations for a long time for them to shift their patterns. It's not impossible, but it takes a lot more to change them than it does to go in freshly setting those boundaries. Because what I've observed is that when, especially with aggressive, overly aggressive communicators, they'll tone it down a bit when somebody stands up and says, hey, I don't want to speak to you about this when you're talking to me like that. I'd like to defer this and let's talk about this when you're calm. Because it takes a lot of guts to stand up and do that. And it makes the other person, it puts it kind of back on them taking responsibility for what they're adding to the situation. And that, not to say that always works. There are certain people with whom you can be as assertive as you want, and it drives them into a rage. And then you kind of know that your choice is take it or leave it, get out or stay. But I think that when those limits are set early on, it makes the path
the earlier the better. And in fact, it's funny you should bring that up, because I think it was last week or the week before, I did like 3 videos of a bully boss that I worked with. Now, during the interviewing process, the person who was leaving told me about it. So I had a lot of insights before I even started. And on day 2, he yelled at me. And so I'm in he's in his office and I'm outside, like we have a shared office, and he's screaming from his office, from his desk, to bring him a specific file. So I brought him the wrong file. And he was super, he had a tantrum. He had a friggin' 3-year-old tantrum. Yeah. And I calmly just said, I can't hear what you need when you yell. And he looked at me and I said it again.
I never heard that before.
Yeah, I can't hear what you need. Yeah. And now I took 3 deep breaths before going out there, right? So
I bet you did 3 deep breaths when you left.
I was like prepared. Yeah. So getting prepared is real important. And as soon as you can get into it, once you start seeing it, you start nipping it in the bud, because it's not going to get better. It's not going to get better if you
absolutely.
And so then I went, and then I said, oh, that file. And I went out. It was on the corner of my desk because I had heard him. So I brought it in. And he said, thank you. I said, sure, I'm always, willing to help, kind of thing. And I knew it from day one. And even when the first time he fired me 4 times in 2 years. I reacted completely unexpected for him. And he had to alter his behavior if he wanted to keep me. And he was terrified of losing me, because I had developed such great relationships with all of his suppliers, with all the head offices and everything. I was in financial services, and he couldn't afford to lose me at this point, because there was no one else in the office who could get all this stuff done. Right. So it was really, he couldn't have me just walk out. And his wife kept saying, oh, I know he yells, just ignore him. He loves you. You're the best thing that's ever happened to his business, and just ignore him. So I just kept asking for more money to stay, and he would give it. So I increased my salary by 40% in 2 years. Just by staying calm, even though my guts were like, oh, he's yelling at me, and I did, But
sometimes that fear of the repercussions holds people back so much. And then, I've been in those situations myself too, where I am nervous as heck, but I know I need to say something. And I make myself, even though I want to throw up. This is in the past, of course, but I don't get that nervous anymore. But But, the reality is that in doing so, you often realize that all those things you feared are so far from the reality. I had times where I feared losing my job and all sorts of things. And in the end, realized that I had a lot more power, I guess, in the position or the dynamic than I realized. So David here says, good job with your situation. Monique, I'd like to share. So let me just pop over here. So like I said earlier, Monique has, so the people who are joining me on LinkedIn Live, some of them have, or I guess we're live on a few platforms now. But Monique, like so many others, have also done a podcast episode with me. I'm not just cutting the audio from the LinkedIn Live and putting it on the podcast. They're completely separate interviews, of course, all still within the same area of expertise of each guest. And so Monique has recorded an episode on building better boundaries in business with me that is live on the podcast. I haven't promoted it yet because I dropped 6 episodes at once and I'm promoting those, but it is up. If you want to check it out at lindsaylapaquette.com podcast, you can listen to her podcast episode there on the Workplace Communication podcast if you've enjoyed what she has shared to date. And Monique, I just would like to give you a chance to let everyone know where they can find you if they want to reach out and connect with you.
So my name is the key to everything. So if you put my initials, my name.com, there's my email. If you go to Monique Caissie there's my website. If you go to LinkedIn, there's my name again. I'm really easy to find. I put my phone number everywhere and I even answer my phone if I'm not busy. I just like talking to people. And it's gotten quiet. Like I lost some business over COVID, as many of us have. So currently I do have some coaching spaces open in my for one-on-one coaching. But of course, I love working with organized. I'm a facilitator. I'm a group facilitator. It's what I love to do. I love to play with people where we get to engage with each other and learn from each other. I just find facilitating the best, but one-on-one is so powerful and goes deeper for every individual. So whatever people are looking for, I can probably put something together for them, depending on what their needs are, if I'm a fit. Yeah.
Perfect. So there's Monique's contact info, and you can reach out to her if you're interested. And listen, thank you as always. I love chatting with you and learning from you. And so thank you for your time tonight. And as I said, we'll put a link to, now I've forgotten what it is. Oh, that document you had referenced with the RISE framework. We'll put a link to that on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's a cheat sheet. So it's like easy to follow. You can print out the first page, fold it up, put it in your wallet. And there you go. You're walking around, going to be super assertive.
Perfect. So you can find that on my YouTube is under Collaborative Solutions. And if anyone wants that sheet and can't find it, just shoot me a message and I will direct you over that way. So thank you.
Excellent.
We'll see you again soon.
Take care. Bye.
Okay, bye.